Hello, this is Kevin Best. I'm your host of Great Leaders Serve, a podcast that is brought to you by the Center for Serving Leadership. Today, we have as our guest, Jason Weaver. Jason is the CEO of a company, and tell me, Jason, tell me about the company. What do you guys do, and what is your entire role?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me on the podcast, Kevin. Just much appreciation for what you're doing in advancing the cause of servant leadership. It's just important for not only in business, but personal and just our society. So I appreciate what you're doing. So yes, like you said, I'm the CEO of a company. The company is Weaver Leather. We're actually in our 50th year this year. We serve several different end markets, anywhere from equine, construction, pet, arborist, livestock show, and leather supply, which is sort of evidenced by our name.
So tell me a little bit about serving leadership and your use of it inside of your company.
Sure. Well, it really defines sort of who we are. So it goes all the way back to our beginning. The company was founded in 1973 by my grandfather, and he had an Amish background, so faith was a big part of his life. And it really comes from a central belief that how you operate in the marketplace and the values that you have on a personal level should be consistent from one area of your life to the other. And at its core, we really believe that servant leadership is informed by, in our case, by our faith. So Jesus is our model of a true servant leader, and we want to emulate that in every walk of life. And of course, it goes far beyond the sort of faith realm into a practical, everyday way of treating people, treating employees, treating customers, treating our suppliers, and really focusing on people and purpose over power and profits, which I think is one way that the sort of mainstream view of leadership or management could be.
So as a follow-up question to that, you and I have talked in the past, and one of the things you said was that your company was also partially owned by a private equity firm. So a private equity firm usually isn't about serving leadership. So how does that play into how you manage the company and what their expectations of you are?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question, and I would be lying if I didn't say that there was some tension there. But I think again, to not compartmentalize things, our role as servant leaders comes into every area of our life, including the relationship that we have with private equity. So, we really want to serve. And I would emphasize too, there's a distinction between serving and being a servant leader. So at least in my mind, the way I view that, Kevin, when we're serving, we're giving people typically what they want. When we're being a servant leader, we're giving people what they need. So, the tension that you get into in a private equity or whether it's a public company or depending on the dynamics is sort of the pressure of short-term results, short-term profits over long-term health, preserving culture, doing things that are right and are going to have the right return over the long arc. And really, the way that we resolve this is being able to sort of respect the outcomes and the goals that our partners have, and really understanding that returning the best financial results comes from a servant leadership model. We believe that wholeheartedly. There is times where in the short run, there is conflict with that. Of course, I'll give an example. We've been very active in the M&A world. So we're always looking to buy a company that makes sense for Weaver, that fits our market strategies, that's complementary to our brand, how we do business, and really sets us up for success in the future. There's also companies that we look at that could be a really good short-term financial win, would provide a return for investors. But as you look at that over the long arc of our timeline, it's something that we feel is not taking us in the direction that we want to go. It really doesn't fit who we are, what we're good at, what our core competencies are. And we've just been very open and honest about that with our financial partners. And I think transparency, quite frankly, is huge when it comes to that. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. The timelines might differ a little bit, but being able to talk openly and honestly about that has been really productive. And we've always gotten to a spot that makes sense, And there's times where you can make some compromises and understand and appreciate what goals and aspirations your investment partners have, and be able to do a good job fulfilling that, and knowing where the line you have to know where that line is, and you sure don't want to step over that and do things that meet those short-term objectives that compromise your long-term potential and really your servant leadership philosophy, which again, it comes back to putting people and your purpose over power and profits is how I would say it.
I appreciate that. And so when you're looking at, you're working with the private equity and you're working with your own board and you're working with your own employees, there are obviously pressing issues that come up, concerns that come up at all different levels with the customers, with the employees, with the board, with the private equity. How do you feel that being a serving leader helps you overcome those concerns?
Yeah. Well, I think it's the filter in which we evaluate everything here. So whether it's concerns with employees, customers, vendors, we want to do the things the right way, and we want to enter into win-win relationships. We want our transaction. We don't want to be transactional. We want to be relational, and that goes for everyone that we work with here. And there, of course, you can take shortcuts, and you can, enter into relationships, apply pressure to customers and vendors to change payment terms, for example. That would be much more favorable for the company, but a detriment to your partners. And really, we have a longer view than that. And using that servant leader philosophy to filter all of those decisions, help us stay grounded in our purpose, Kevin, and stay true to the things that have made this company successful over time. And we are completely convicted and convinced are going to lead to the best short-term and long-term financial outcomes. And, there's times too, I think, where if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. So you have to know what you stand for, and you have to know where to draw the lines. And there's certain things that, when goals ultimately come into conflict, and I'm not referring to necessarily our situation here. I think we all run into this in different parts of our lives. We have to make choices, and sometimes there's a cost to our choices. And I think that's where the rubber really hits the road. Are you a dedicated servant leader? Are you committed to the principles of putting people before financial returns, doing what's best and what's right in the marketplace? Or are you more committed to profits and doing things that are financially motivated? And that gets tested all the time. I don't care if your situation is private equity or if it's independently owned. There's temptations all around us. And, I think the only way to stay refreshed or to stay dedicated and committed to that is to refresh your philosophy, be around like-minded leaders, fill your mind with content like you're creating, books, podcasts, materials, so you can learn from other people's experience and how they handle some of these conflicts. And I've done a ton of that over time. And it's just judgment. You have to learn from experience. You have to do a lot of soul searching sometimes, and you really have to ask yourself, where can I compromise without compromising my values and my way of doing things and my commitment to treating people right?
So when you're thinking about that, it's hard to do when you're young, and then you're raised. It sounds like you're third generation, correct, or second generation in the business?
Third
generation. So this business has been around for a while. How is that training done? How do you get to the level where you're able to make that distinction when you're young and you're saying, "Man, I'm hungry. I want to do better for this business, and I cut a little corner here to help the company make a couple extra dollars. Isn't that a good thing?" And it maybe is until later that you figure out that it might not be a good thing. So how did you get trained And how did that create, were there any mistakes that you really made that said, man, I look back at this now and this is what I would have done differently?
Well, of course. I mean, I make mistakes every day. Now, I think I'd maybe start by answering that question with just knowing yourself, for one thing. So one of the things that we do is we do a lot of personal development here at Weaver, leadership development. One of the things that we use is a DISC test. So it's understanding your personality, your tendencies, where your strengths are. We've done a Clifton strength finder test with all of our managers. And for me, my top strength comes back as belief. So just the way I'm wired, Kevin, is my belief system sort of overpowers everything else. And it's a little easier maybe for me to take a stand on things than some people that have, and I'm not making any judgments here whatsoever. It's just how I'm wired. But I think taking a stand and not compromising on my beliefs comes very naturally to me. However, I believe, of course, all of our strengths can become our greatest weakness at the same time too. So I can also be a little stubborn, a little obstinate, and some of the mistakes I've made have been maybe taking too hard of a stand on things that there was room to move in the other direction and still come out with a great outcome, and I think that's something that I continue to learn about as well, is where are those lines and how can I really be a good partner and be accommodating and make concessions that won't compromise our way of doing things here. And back to your question, I'm sorry, this is sort of long and winding, but how do I learn how did I learn those things when I was younger? I can just say great teachers. So my Uncle Paul, who really built this company, had a passion for teaching, a passion for servant leadership. He was practicing servant leadership when servant leadership wasn't a thing, and it came back from his passion to learn and grow, invest in his personal resources and time into content that helped him solidify his value system and the culture here that really almost makes it automatic here. So I'm a beneficiary of Paul and everyone else that came before me, and just, surrounding yourself with the right people, surrounding yourself with people that have been there before, have been through tough situations and tough decisions and have navigated complexity and gray areas. I've got people on my speed dial that I call when I get stuck on something, and it always is helpful. And it's almost never after I have a conversation with an advisor that I hang up the phone and continue on the exact same course that I was on. Almost always do I have a slightly different perspective from that. And the more you do that day in, day out, year after year, it just shapes who you are and how you process decisions and the well of wisdom that you have to tap into.
And when you're thinking about the next generation that comes along, and the employees that you have, is there a training model that you walk them through, and how does that work?
Absolutely, yes. So we have well-designed and well-structured leadership training programs here at Weaver. We have expectations. We sort of have it in the context of Weaver 101 for all employees, operating principles for everyone to operate by. And then we have supervisory management standards that we name 201 and 301. So within that, it just clearly lays out what our leadership philosophy is, how we operate, what is important, what are the things that we have to be good at as leaders in order to ensure success and growth for the company in the future. And then we train all the time. We bring in outside speakers. We send people to conferences. We do a character training meeting company-wide once a month where we actually shut the company down, select a character trait, review that, and how we can apply it to our personal lives and grow as individuals, and how we can use it to get better as a company and apply it within the four walls here. And I think in a nutshell, Kevin, it's the lifeblood of the company without sort of overselling it. Its potential lies in people. And when you have individuals that are growing, your company is going to grow. And if you're not growing people and growing leaders, your company over time is not going to grow and develop. So it's just being intentional and having programs, processes in place. You have to articulate what you want the business to be, what your value system is, and then you have to model that. And, I've learned that the hard way too. And when you get it wrong, you have to be able to admit your mistakes and take the beating for it as well. That's how we learn and grow.
And so now you have to bring in outside advisors at different times for different reasons. You have attorneys, you have accountants, you have insurance people that come into the business that you need to bring in. When you're working with those people, are you in the professional career that you have? Are you looking for a serving leader mindset first from them, or are you looking for a skill set mindset and hope that that serving leader comes in later on?
Well, it's really an easy question. What we can't do as a company is settle for below average counsel in any area, whether it's accounting or legal, insurance, you name it. So we have to have top shelf ability and skills. But what I've found, Kevin, is when you start working with people that are not like-minded, it ultimately will not work out. At the end of the day, your advisors and the professionals that you're working with represent you. They speak for you in certain cases. They help you draft agreements. They're providing counsel on financial reporting. And that's going to ultimately influence what people think of you and who you are and how you're viewed in the marketplace. And we've had instances where we've had relationships with outside advisors that were very good at what they do, but they clearly did not have a serving leader mindset. They were in it for ego. They were arrogant. They had all the answers. They were in it to win and forget about the other party, And we let those people go and we made a switch. And what we found is if you look for serving leader, you look for that mentality first, you will very much find the ability and the skills and the technical talent that you need to, but you have to start with filtering that first. I'll use a quick example on the vendor side. So with the way we source our products, we look for three things. I think it's called the iron triangle. You can have quality, delivery, or cost. Pick two out of the three things. You can almost never have all three of those things. So what we prioritize is quality first, and then delivery, and then cost. So if you start with cost, which is the temptation, you want to buy things as good as possible so you can have the best prices in the marketplace and maximize your margin and all that. I mean, that's practical business. But if you start with that and say, I'll start with cost, and then I'm going to work with this vendor to get the quality standards up to where it needs to be, it doesn't work that way. And what we've found with that is sort of the reason behind that, a core Deming principle. Quality is a mindset. And I would sort of extrapolate that to it's caring about what you're doing. It's a deep care and concern for what and how you do things. And that spins all the way into a serving leader mindset. And we've had vendors where we started with low cost products and tried to work on quality, but they don't have that filter. And we were very unsuccessful in trying that. So on the flip side, you work with someone that has quality as their top priority. Now we can start to work on cost. And how can we take cost out of the product? And you have a desire to serve. You have the deep care and concern for what they do that is the fuel to achieve those things. It's the same in the professional space as well.
And what I can imagine from that is that once you get that high quality, the value that's going to come from there, you're working with people that you like, you're working with people that you respect, and they respect and like you, mm-hmm. and the relationship becomes even easier going forward. So it's more of a long-term relationship instead of that short-term win that you talked about before. So when I'm thinking about that, yes. Now I'm thinking about, okay, what are you doing in the community and your family? So you think about all this training that you're giving to your employees that you've gotten yourself. How does that reflect in how those employees and yourself. In fact, you can use yourself as an example in terms of how your family is raised with a serving leader mindset, and then extrapolate that into the community and what both Weaver and yourself do for the community in that serving leader mindset as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, well, it starts with the idea that it's not about you. It's not, stealing that from Rick Warren's purpose-driven life. It's not about you. And one of the things that we really value here is humility, and I think that's one of the biggest indicators if you're dealing with a servant leader or someone that has different priorities. Arrogance flies in the face of that. So we try to cultivate that in our family. We try to work with people in the community on a personal level, our personal advisors and our personal service professionals that we work with. We're looking for people that are humble, and they're not arrogant, and they're not in it for themselves. We do a lot of things with our kids to try to cultivate that. We do Bible studies together, reading together all the time. We, try to serve at our church locally as well to cultivate that mindset. And then within the community as well, I'm involved in a local group of fellow like-minded leaders, and we share ideas. We present toolboxes. We're there to encourage, to build each other up, to grow, and really take whatever we have and offer it to others as a way of not only giving back, but I believe too, when you teach and you share, you learn a lot more than what you actually pass along. So it's a huge benefit to the individual as well as to the group to be able to be involved in things like that. So
one of the things that I've noticed, Jason, is that serving leaders, as you said, are humble. So they're not shouting from the rooftops, "Hey, look at me, I'm a serving leader, come talk to me." So when you're going out and looking for serving leaders, you have the opportunity to talk to other serving leaders first. But when you're just out there and you're talking, and maybe you're across the country, how do you run into people, or when you're working with a private equity firm, or when you're sourcing out different work from different organizations, how do you make the determination whether they're a serving leader-minded organization, individual, and how do you find them?
That's a great question. I think networking is huge. Like, for example, when we made a change with one of our service providers, we got connected to another one to take his spot from a local business in the area that has a lot of the same viewpoints that we have and the same value on serving leaders. They connected us to this person, and it's been a wonderful connection. I think in today's day and age, social media is a good way. Although, I think a lot of probably true humble servant leaders maybe shy away from social media. Now, that's not always the case. Obviously, there's a lot of great content producers out there that are very humble and have a great philosophy that make their content available through social media. So I'm not trying to make that judgment, but I think it's like-mindedness. I think just through conversation, through relationships, and I think the more you can meet people face to face, look people in the eye, you just get a better sense for who they are. And, there's really no substitute for that, I would say.
Thank you for that. And when you're talking about, you brought up the idea of some blogs or podcasts. Are there any out there that you're looking at right now that are saying, hey, this is really promoting good servant leadership, good serving leadership, and this is something that you promote to others?
Yeah, definitely. I'm probably more of a book reader than I am a podcast guy. But, when I'm driving or whatnot, I definitely do. But some of my favorites, Craig Rochelle Leadership Podcast is probably my top resource. He does a wonderful job. There's a Carey Nieuwhof podcast. There's John Maxwell Company has a Maxwell Leadership Podcast. Andy Stanley Leadership Podcast. The Pat Lencioni at the Table podcast is a wonderful resource as well. But, I think no matter how you prefer your information, in today's day and age, you can find unlimited resources by just looking, I think the problem becomes there's so much information out there. It's filtering to get to the very best and the most applicable. And again, I go by a lot of what people refer to me. So I read a book one time that said, don't waste your time on anything that is not great content, and specifically in books. Read only the best. It's like, well, how do you find that? And,
Right.
This person pointed to some of the timeless classics, like what are the all-time classic books that every leader should be reading. And we actually did an interesting thing with our management team. We had everybody go through and name one book that if they could only have one book and they would reread that over and over and over, what would that book be? So we had a list of 25 books that was people's absolute favorites, which was pretty interesting. And in today's day and age, I think it you get into this sort of bragging rights. How much can you consume? How much do you know? People were posting, I think last year around New Year's, here's the 1,000 books that I'm going to read next year, or the 500 books. And somebody posted below that and said, nobody is afraid of the person that reads 500 different books. Everybody is afraid of the person that reads the same book 500 times. So, that's been an inspiration to me. I love to read. I'm curious. My mind, I like to go in different directions. I like to read biographies. I like to mix in some science and philosophy. And but I focus mostly on business and leadership content. But there's a couple books that, I just would keep coming back to. The Leadership Challenge by James Kouzes and Barry Posner is one of those. The Advantage by Pat Lencioni is another one. And probably my two all-time favorites are both sports related. But the book Wooden, I can't remember who that author was, but it's John Wooden's philosophy, which is amazing. And The Mentor Leader by Tony Dungy, which is just an incredible philosophy.
Well, thank you very much. And I have one more question for you. So you have the opportunity to meet other people at all times, regardless of age. People are always looking for advice on how they can get better. So when somebody comes to you and says, hey, how can I be a better person, a better father, a better business owner, a better boss, for lack of a better term on that one, how do you talk to them about that? How do you help them get to that next level that they want to get to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it's pretty simple. It's actually, who are you surrounding yourself with, and what are you putting into your mind? So, the very old adage, who you are is a function of the 5 people that you spend the most time with and the 5 books that you read. So it's, garbage in, garbage out. If you want to improve and you want to get better, you have to make good choices. And that starts with the people you're surrounding yourself with and the content that you're putting into your mind, and developing the discipline and the habits to be able to be consistent with that. Examine what's in your heart and what do you really stand for? Who do you want to be? What is your calling? And filter everything through that, and it needs to be authentic. It needs to be you. And what is your motive? Why do you want to get better? Is it because you want to make a ton of money? You want to have a powerful position? Or do you want to develop what you've been uniquely gifted and created to be in service to others? And if that's your answer, then I think the journey will be a lot more productive and a lot more successful for you.
Absolutely. Jason, I want to thank you so much for talking with me today. And for everybody else, centerforservingleadership.com. You can check that out for more information on how their leadership training series goes. But I appreciate today, Jason. I appreciate everything that you brought to me today. And I look forward to having more conversations with you in the future.
Sounds great, Kevin. Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you for joining us once again for Great Leaders Serve.
For more information about the Center for Serving Leadership, visit our website at centerforservingleadership.com.